Okay, it's the top of the hour, and I'd like to welcome you to another What's New in Zimbra session. And today's topic is going to be Zimbra Drive. My name is Andrew Shingler. I'm a senior sales engineer with Zimbra. And if you do have any questions, feel free to post those in the Q&A section. This will be quite a short session, but I'll try and answer any questions that come up at the end of the presentation. So without further ado, let's get into the slides. So I think the first thing we need to define here is what do we mean by Zimbra Drive. So there's been various naming conventions and different applications within Zimbra that have similar types of functionality. So I wanted to sort of start with some clarity around what we're actually talking about. So going through some of the applications that handle files and sharing of files. So for those of you that are familiar with Zimbra, you will probably be aware of Zimbra Briefcase. So Briefcase has been around since version 5, so several years, and this essentially allows users to upload files to their Zimbra mailbox server, and then they can access those files and share them within the web client between the different users internally and also externally. Then we have what we call Zimbra Open Drive, and this is probably where some of the confusion comes around, because that was originally named Zimbra Drive. This particular drive functionality, the Open Drive functionality, has been available since version 8.8.8. Now, Zimbra Drive provides access to files stored on an external file sync and share service, which is either based on OwnCloud or the Nextcloud platform. So in terms of the Open Drive technology, and that is what it is named now, that requires a third-party storage platform from Nextcloud or OwnCloud. So you essentially need separate file storage for that. Then we have Zimbra Drive, which is also known as Zimbra Drive V2. So some of the documentation that you might see might refer to it as Zimbra Drive V2, but this is what we are talking about today. So this was originally released in 8.8.10 patch 2. It is in beta mode, and it still is in beta mode at the moment. So one piece of advice here is obviously in terms of if you want to test it or trial it or do some kind of proof of concept, we would advise at this point in time that you only do it in test environments. We wouldn't advise being a beta product that you put this into production. But this is essentially a new component that provides, again, a fully fledged file storage system integrated with the Zimbra web client. And one of the key things here is that this will eventually be the replacement to the Briefcase. So we're bringing essentially Briefcase up to date and giving a new capabilities within there. So as I say, it is in beta mode at the moment, but it will be going to a GA release in the next release, which is 8.8.12, which will be due out in the next couple of weeks. So keep your eyes out for that. But just so that we're all clear in terms of the naming that we're using here, we're talking about Zimbra Drive, or AKA Zimbra Drive V2. So what does it provide you in terms of features? So from a front-end point of view, you can upload, download files, manage your files within your Zimbra web client. You can organize the files within folders, so it has a very sort of similar folder structure to any operating system, whether it's a Mac or a Windows machine. It's familiar to users in terms of navigating through those folders. You can preview the files, so you don't have to download them to see what the contents of those files are. So depending on the file type, it will have different preview capabilities. It will either preview directly within the browser, or it might utilize the Zimbra Docs functionality as well to be able to view the files. You can mark files for quick access as preferred files or starred files. You can add notes to those files. You can share those files currently internally, so you can share it to users within the platform or within groups of users within the platform itself. You will be able to share files externally, but that will be coming soon. So you'll have to wait for that functionality at the moment. As I mentioned earlier, there is an integration with Zimbra Docs. So for those of you that saw my presentation, my last What's New as in the Zimbra presentation, we talked about Zimbra Docs. So it does integrate with with Zimbra Docs, so you can open files and documents directly from the Zimbra Drive environment, and you can edit them and have collaborative editing sessions with those. There's a search criteria within there, so it has its own search engine, but it uses a similar kind of syntax within there, and you'll be able to see that you can do sort of complex searches and so on. And also folder-based navigation, so again, just accessing documents by navigating through folders. There's a quick sort of stateful navigation folder, and you'll see that in the later slides, where you can have quick access to areas that you want to access easily and quickly from within the web client. From a back-end point of view, so the files are stored in the Zimbra mailbox server. So unlike OpenDrive, which is using a third-party system, this is more akin to what Briefcase does in storing the files themselves within the mailbox server. There is also a comprehensive command line interface. So from an administration point of view, you have the option to do some command line operations on the Zimbra Drive functionality as well. So what does the user interface look like? So this is what the user is presented with. So like nearly all applications within Zimbra, it's separated into its own tab. So by clicking on that tab, that we'll be presented with this menu. So just looking at the structure here. So in panel 1, we've got this quick access navigation panel. So this is where you can, sort of quickly click on those items to find your preferred elements, recently edited items and so on. 2 is your folder navigation. So you'll be able to sort of navigate through the folders through that bar at the top. Item 3 is actually the information panel, the info box. So when you click on there, it opens up another panel, and it gives you more detailed information about the document that you have highlighted at the time, including a sort of a thumbnail preview of it, and also you can launch the preview of the document itself. In 4, you've got the upload and search features, so you can create new files. So again, if you're working with Zimbra Docs, you can create new files directly from within there. You can upload files, and also you've got a search capability. So search, like all the search capability in Zimbra, just starts with a simple keyword search. Then it will expand out into a more advanced search where you can set certain criteria to limit your search. 5 is where your folder lists are, so you can see all your folders that you've created, and again you've got nested folder structures there. And then 6 is your list of files. So that's kind of just the overview of what the panel is that the user would see when they go into the Zimbra Drive tab. So in terms of navigation, so the navigation panel on the left-hand side, we do have this quick access menu. So you have preferred items, so this is where you can identify individual files that you want to mark or star, so you can then quickly find those files just by clicking on your preferred elements icon there. You can see any files that have been recently edited, so if you need to go back and search for files that you've edited in the last few hours or something, if you look on the recently edited, it will sort those in order of the last time they were edited. Then you've got the option to see what files have been shared with me. So any files or folders that have been shared with you shared to you by other users, you can click on there. And you'll see when you click on that item, it actually uses the search syntax to find those shared items or items that have been shared with you. So again, it's essentially using, in the same way that Zimbra Mail Client does, it's using searches for everything to find those items. And then you can see items that you have shared yourself, so you shared out to other users, and again it's just using that search criteria. And then finally you've got mark for deletion items. So there is a subtle difference in terms of how the deletion process happens within Zimbra Drive. and I'll highlight this in slides further through the presentation. So in terms of sharing, so Drive files and folders can be shared independently. And I think this is probably one of the key differences between how the briefcase works and how Zimbra Drive works. So in the briefcase application, you could only actually share a folder. So you couldn't really share an individual file. Whereas in Drive, you now have the capability just to share an individual file and assign the access rights to that individual file. And the sharing permissions are essentially view, you've got edit, and edit and share. So obviously view is just a view only, read only in terms of the file that you're sharing. Edit means that they've got read-write capability around that file. And then edit and share is essentially read-write, but then that user that you're sharing it to also has the ability to reshare that file or folder that you've shared with them. So it's very simple in terms of selecting, right-clicking on there, adding users that you want to share it with. It will obviously access the global address list, where you can auto-complete users within your environment. And then to edit or change that share, you simply click on the drop down and just change the sharing permission. So a very simple, straightforward way of sharing and setting permissions. So item deletion. So as I say, this works subtly different to how other items are deleted within Zimbra. So when you delete an item, they're not put into the trash folder. So typically when you delete an item in Zimbra, whether it's a mail item or a calendar item or a contact item, they get pushed into the general trash folder within there. Whereas within Zimbra Drive, it has its own deletion or trash folder essentially within there. So items will be marked for deletion. So there's always the ability to go back and recover those items if you think, actually, no, I didn't want to delete that. Or you can then right-click on those items and delete them permanently. Obviously, we will also be adding the ability to put a retention period behind those files or behind the deletion process. So in the same way that you do with your mail folders, you'll be able to set a retention period so that for instance, you could say once an item has been marked for deletion, after 30 days, it would be expunged completely from the trash folder. So as I say, just to be aware that there's a subtle difference in the deletion. So if you deleted an item within Drive, but then you cleared the trash folder in your mail application, it's not going to permanently delete items from Drive as well. So the info box is by clicking on the I button or the I icon at the top, it opens up this information box, and within there you've got certain information that you can see. So in terms of, from top to bottom, you can see the name of the file that you've selected. You've got a preview of the file, so you just got a little sort of thumbnail preview of what the contents of that file is, as long as it's a format that it can support in terms of previewing. Then you've got the various action items available that you would have normally got in the right click. So you've got open, rename, move, copy, download, share, edit, star, and delete, and so on. So again, you've got access to all those. You can edit the sort of creation, and you've got the creation and edit information within there as well. So you've got some context in terms of when it what the size of the file, who it's created by, or the dates it was created and the dates it was modified. And then the final field is where you can add a description, so you can put more context around that file itself by adding a more comprehensive description of what it contains. And as I say, from the open menu, you can either open and it will preview within the web client, or if it were a Word document, it would open it up in Zimbra Docs, for instance. So that's kind of the high-level overview of what it looks like from an end user's perspective. And as I say, you have the option of running this in a trial environment. It is available to download and deploy. From a technical point of view, there is a few things that we probably need to highlight here. So briefcase, so when we talk about briefcase files, they were stored or are stored as mail-like items within the mailbox folder tree, whereas Drive stores them in a slightly different way. So it has a detached folder hierarchy structure based on the nodes themselves. So Drive folders don't appear as mail folders. So again, if you're familiar from an administration point of view how briefcase works, a briefcase folder actually can be viewed and manipulated using things like the ZM mailbox command to see the folders, where Drive folders don't appear within that functionality, and you wouldn't have that command line capability within there. Drive metadata is actually stored in a dedicated HSQL database. So as opposed to briefcase, which is using the standard MariaDB database, here it has a completely separate database where it's got that metadata stored about the file itself. And it will store the file on a dedicated folder within the roots volume. So on the next bullet point, you can see here, so in terms of file naming, again, it's hash-based instead of ID-based, and that allows us to do some more work around sort of deduplication and compression. But if we compare how files are stored between a briefcase and a Drive file, you can see a briefcase file is essentially structured in the same way that a mail item is stored. You know, it is actually stored as a MIME structure within the Zimbra store. Whereas a Drive file, again, it's using a hash for there, but the way the structure of the file itself is different. You know, it's essentially just the file that's been stored there within the hash directory. So some other things you need to be aware. So the NG backup is aware of Drive. So obviously, in terms of the real-time scanner and also the smart scan, they're aware of Zimbra Drive files. So no additional actions are required to ensure that the files are protected and backed up. From an HSM point of view, Drive files can be stored on different volumes. So this is quite, it's different to how briefcase works. So Drive files can actually be stored on a dedicated volume for themselves. So the default is it just puts them on the primary one, and the HSM policies can move Drive files onto different volumes other than that current secondary one. So effectively, you're allowing those Drive files to be stored on a completely separate volume. If you do apply the HSM policy to the Drive files, they are handled under the document item type. So when you create your criteria for your HSM policy, when you specify the document aging criteria, it will then pick up those Drive files within there. So I said at the beginning of the presentation that Drive is essentially going to be a replacement for briefcase. So one of the things that we have included here is the ability to migrate briefcase data over to Drive using a dedicated CLI command. So using that command, you can import your existing briefcase data. It can accept a comma-separated list of targets. You can also specify it at a domain level as well, and I think you can also combine the two together. So there is that possibility to, move away from the briefcase application and move into Drive. And as I say, this will be something as we bring this into full production release, a full GA release. You might want to start thinking about, is this something that you want to offer your users and moving over to the Drive implementation. So how do I get started with Zimbra Drive? Pretty straightforward. So it requires Network Edition. So you do need the Network Edition version. As I say, it's currently in beta. So the release it came out in was 8.8.10 patch 2. So anything above that would have the Zimbra Drive capability in there. So in terms of starting the service, there is a Zimlet associated with Zimbra Drive, so comms, extras, Drive. That needs to be enabled on your platform from an admin point of view. And then also you need to start the service itself because it's a server extension. So by default, it wouldn't be started, and you would need to do a CLI start of that process. And then simply in terms of enabling users to be able to have the drive feature, it's just a matter of enabling that Zimlit and making it available either at a per user level or through the classes service, so that they can access that drive feature, and they'll have that tab when they log into to the Zimbra interface. There is documentation, so it's actually contained within the general admin documentation, and there is a section within there. So you'll see that link that I've given there is that will actually take you directly to our GitHub repository that has the Zimbra admin guide, and that will point you straight to the Zimbra Drive documentation. And as you can see there, it's referred to as Zimbra Drive V2. Again, just a last note, it is beta, so it's for testing only, but it is due to go GA very, very soon. Future-wise, I mean, you'll see as we evolve it as a product, our product management team will be looking to enhance and add capabilities around there. I think one of the things that we are looking at implementing is creating some sync clients or clients for mobile and tablet devices. So again, the ability to access and work with the Zimbra Drive on those particular devices, but that will come in the future. And if you stay tuned to what we're doing from a roadmap perspective, and Rene Otto and his team will be making announcements in terms of the future of the Drive functionality. So that completes the session for today. I hope that was useful. If you do have any questions, feel free to contact us at Zimbra or contact your local partner, and we'll be happy to try and answer any questions you've got there. So I don't see any questions that have come in on the Q&A panel during the session, so I'd like to thank you for attending today, and I hope what I've gone through has been useful, and I look forward to running another session with you later on next month. Thank you.